Hello YouTube, it's Barbara Jean. I'm going to try and do some of the videos I have to do in smaller segments. They're pretty heavy duty. First thing I wanted to talk about was the constellations. There's, and I, I'm really struggling here. The constellations tell the story of Jesus. They do. They tell the story of Christ. They have been corrupted by Satan and his lies. Every constellation in our solar system, God had put them there for signs and seasons. The Bible says they are put there for signs and seasons to declare God, to declare the story of his Son, Jesus Christ. I just looked up what came to my mind this morning. The Lord told me to talk about Cephas. Cephas is one of the constellations in our galaxy. Cephas is the word for stone. If you watched my last video, you know that the stone, the rock, is Jesus Christ. And that Jesus is coming to remove his bride, his people, from the earth. But the rock will hit the foot of this earthly evil kingdom, and it will all come tumbling down with the arrival of the rock. Cephas is a constellation. It's the king constellation. It's the king sitting on the throne. The king is holding in his hand the scepter. And he's holding out his scepter to two constellations. Really, it's actually the constellation of Cassiopeia, which is the queen constellation. It is the constellation of the bride. And there are actually two constellations there. One is Andromeda, which is the chained woman, and the other one is the free woman. There's a couple of allegories that could be taken from that. One could be Israel, and the other one, the church. It could be taken as the bride pre-rapture and the bride after rapture. So, anyway, the king is holding out the scepter to the bride. Now, this should remind you of something if you have any Bible knowledge. And if you do not, I will tell you, it should remind you of Queen Esther, Mordecai, her cousin, who raised her, and the king of Persia, who was the great king of the time, the king of Babylon, King Xerxes. There's a wonderful movie out that you can watch. It's been on TV. That had a wonderful rendition of the Queen Esther story. I'm just going to remind you of it. The story is of a woman who was chosen to save her people from a wicked man, Haman the Agagite, who wanted to destroy all Jews off the earth, to swipe them out. This woman, Esther, was just a simple girl who was taken to the palace and chosen to be queen. But she hid her identity. She hid her true identity, which was her Jewishness. She hid it from the palace scribes and from the king. And she was hidden for a reason, to protect her and also to destroy Haman, the enemies of God. Because little did they know, if they were trying to destroy the wife of the king, Haman's evil plots, he would not have fulfilled the job that he was doing. And God used this woman to destroy this man and also his everyone who, all the enemies of Israel, all the enemies. And it was during the time of Esther that the people went back into Israel and built the temple. It was rebuilt during her time. I'm just going to read a couple of Bible verses. Just first finish what I'm saying about the constellations. I had just looked in Wikipedia, and it was talking about constellations sorted by month. Not quite sure what that means, but when I went through the constellations that were sorted by month, in October, which is actually the month of Libra, if you're going by the 12-month constellations, we were actually in Libra. It's between Virgo, and then we got the constellation of Libra. In October, what I found out was that this Aquarius, I don't know if you remember, those who watched my other video, the age of Aquarius. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, the dream that I had about Aquarius. It turns out Aquarius is sorted into the month of October, according to this Wikipedia site that I'm on. It talks about October, and the constellations that are for October are Aquarius. Aquarius is the water bearer. Jesus Christ is the water bearer. Okay, so that's when it talks about Aquarius, he is the water bearer. He's the giver of the living water. Also in the October month is Cephas. Cephas is the name of Peter. It's Peter's name. But Cephas means specifically rock or stone. Okay, he is the rock. Jesus is the rock, and he's also, Cephas, I told you, is the king constellation of the king on the throne with the scepter, holding it out to Cassiopeia. Also, Grus, spelled Grus, which is it's the crane constellation. I'm not quite sure what that means, except maybe it refers to a bird flying away. There's also the constellation of Pegasus, which is the winged horse. Jesus Christ rides a horse, a white horse, which is Pegasus. And Pisces Austrinus, which also is the southern fish. It's a southern fish. So it could, because Pisces, there's two fish in Pisces. There's two fishes in the constellation of Pisces, and this is the southern fish. And this could indicate the separation of the church, the lukewarm from the hot will be separated. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. November is the month, is Andromeda and Cassiopeia, Phoenix, Pisces, Sculptor, and Tucana. I thought that was rather interesting. So what I wanted to say about this, let me just first read in Esther. I wanted to read Esther chapter 4. Sorry, people. It's not very good with this. Starting at verse 13. Mordecai has just written to Esther and sent her a note telling her about the destruction of the Jews. And anybody who knows the story, Esther goes to the king and pleads for her life and the life of her people from the destruction of the evil Haman. And in the presence of her enemies, she makes this plea. I'm going to read what Mordecai says to Esther when Esther is reluctant to go to the king. Esther chapter 4, verse 13. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, for thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knowest whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Now I want to read Esther chapter 7. Sorry, this takes so long. This is just a little difficult for me. Chapter 7, starting at verse... Just a moment. I'll have to call you back. Starting at verse 6. Oh, let me just start. Chapter 7, starting at verse 1. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondsmen and bondswomen, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then King Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, rising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king, returning out of the palace garden into the palace of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereupon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. This story of Esther had, it's a biblical allegory in some ways. It was a reality, but it's also an allegory for the spiritual church, for the spiritual bride who would stand in the gap for her people. Jesus is the king, and we are the bride, and the king will come. And the enemies of the bride will be delivered into the hands of Satan. He will be hanged out to dry. The bride had to stand up and plead on behalf of her people to be delivered. And the scepter was lowered to her. I think I'm going to stop the video now. I'm not going to go any further with this. I'm just going to leave it at that, and just I will make my next video. God bless.